Before we jump into this episode, I want to remind you that while Caitlin and Sophia are dietitians, we're not your dietitians. This means the information shared in the Food Freedom Fertility podcast is intended to entertain, educate, and inform. It is not a substitute for medical care. This information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making any changes.
All right, welcome to Connection Corner. This is a new segment you may have heard from our last episode where we're going to read a review or an email or something that we get from those listeners that take the time to reach out to us. Our favorite way for you to do this is to leave a review on Apple Podcasts so that the algorithm can favor the podcast and help more people. Sophia and I don't know what we're doing with this podcast if we aren't connecting and actually meeting your guys' needs. We can hang out together without big clunky headphones on and recording ourselves and having to listen to our voices, or pay a VA to get this all produced.
Or do a stack of research to give you a well-informed episode.
Amen. But we're not doing that. We're wearing the silly headphones and cursing at technology sometimes and doing the things. So leave us a rating and review. And today we're going to hear from Rachel.
Rachel titled her review today, Finding Joy. To CNS, which is Caitlin and Sophia. I can't tell you the joy I have experienced listening to your podcast. My soul, mind, and body are nourished. God has blessed you both with an ability to communicate knowledge, but also to reflect His goodness and mercy. Well done. You have continued to show up, and I'm certain it isn't easy and many times thankless, but know that you are touching souls and the souls trying to bring forth life. Praying for you both that you too have great joy in this new year. Rachel, that's about the sweetest thing that I've ever heard. Thank you so much for your beautiful review. And you know, it is thankless sometimes, but not today because you just left us that wonderful review. Thanks, Rachel.
Welcome to another episode of Food, Freedom, and Fertility. I am your host today, Caitlin Johnson, registered dietitian and functional nutritionist in the fertility space, loving on the PCOS women. Today, Sophia is off at a resort playing with her babies in a pool, and so I have another Sophia with me today. Welcome, Sophia. I meant to ask you before we hit record, how do I say your last name? Gushée?
No one ever knows how. Oh my God, you're like the first. Sophia Ruan Gushée.
Sophia Ruan Gushée. So I'm very excited to speak with Sophia today. We have a different kind of an expert, Sophia, with us. Sophia is a non-toxic lifestyle expert and an author of A to Z of Detoxing, the ultimate guide to reducing our toxic exposure, and several detox workbooks. She's been praised by experts in both medical and wellness fields for her practical approach to avoiding toxins and cultivating a healthier home environment. She's served on the Brown University School of Public Health Advisory Council and Well and Good Council. A graduate of Brown University and Columbia Business School, Sophia has helped thousands of people enjoy healthier lives by simplifying non-toxic living while protecting the ease and convenience of a modern life. So welcome, Sophia. We're so happy to have you.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, when I read this, one thing I love is the word practical approach. I think this idea of non-toxic living, or even people start calling it clean living. I'm eating clean. I'm cleaning up my home. There's a lot of kind of press and attention on this. And yet it can be a little overwhelming when you start looking at all the opportunities we have in our life to interact with things that are toxic. And it can go from being seems like a good idea to this feels really scary, like that. And I'm excited today that maybe we can take a little bit of the mountain that feels like it's before you. I mean, in some ways it is kind of scary, the things that we interact with. Maybe we can take the fear out of practical steps you can take today to address some of these things. So I'd love to kind of hear, I like to say it like you're superhero origin story. You know, sometimes you come into superhero comic books and like you see what they're doing and how they can fly and, you know, what their magical power is. But oftentimes there's a story that really somebody had a lot to overcome or a really big why or something that drew their passion into an area of work. So I'd love to hear kind of that background to Sophia and how you ended up here.
Yeah, it does seem like an old version of me because it started before, I think back to before I became a mom. I live in New York City and I worked super hard for my dream job in distressed investing, which means that on behalf of institutional investors, my team and I would dive into emergency situations with imperfect information to quickly assess how to create the most value out of a disaster of a situation. And when I became a mom in 2007, I was about 34 years old. I felt very scared about how to take care of this really fragile infant. And every night after a long day at work, I would start reading about how to guide my daughter's next day, how I wanted the nanny to schedule my daughter's time. In this evening routine, this is when I would accidentally learn about toxic chemicals and heavy metals in everyday products. Mm-hmm. So for me, the most defining memory is when I was learning about BPA, which is now really well known, but in 2007, I didn't know anyone talking about BPA. But I learned in a book written by a pediatrician that some baby bottles have BPA, which is a cancer-causing chemical, and some baby bottle nipples have nitrosamines, which is also a cancer-causing chemical. And my reaction was, this cannot be true. If this were true, my pediatrician or my OBGYN would have mentioned this. But I couldn't ignore this. So I found myself applying my professional skill sets to figure out, are there credible sources that are backing up these claims? And by 2 a.m., I felt like I wanted to make safer choices. Then I was up till 4 a.m. on Amazon to figure out what are the safer choices. And even after I learned glass baby bottles are safer, it took a long time to get comfortable that glass wouldn't be unsafe if it cracked or fell. And so there are just so many questions that took hours to research. And that night ended up representing one among hundreds of other examples over 8 years. And I decided to share all the science-based research that I wish I knew sooner, so I didn't have to learn, or others didn't have to learn in that way, which is accidentally at inconvenient times when it is really disruptive. And it really would have been so much better if I could have learned before I had an infant, because I think mothers' protective instincts are especially heightened during certain stages of their baby's life to protect the baby. And it just would be kinder if an informed source could give a heads up to a mom and lay out the practical things that a mom can do. And since I never found that resource, I decided all of my experiences was a calling for me to create what I wish I had sooner.
Yeah, I hear that loud and clear. I think about my mother-in-law when I had a toddler, and I had very intentionally bought these like little mason jars that had like a silicone wrap around them on the outside. And she's like, your baby could still drop this and break it, and then there would be glass everywhere. And so she went home, and like the next thing I knew, an Amazon box was delivered with these like plastic, very flimsy, colorful, so they looked like a child would love them, cups. And it was so thoughtful. But it was going backwards in keeping my child safe. I know she meant well, and she listens to my podcast, so Colleen, I love you. But there was an intentional shift that my home had already made to let my children drink from glass on purpose so that we weren't consuming liquids out of plastic, especially if you're going to warm that liquid up, even if it says it's BPA free, right? So there are intentional decisions that as you start implementing, you can't just implement, you have to educate the people around you that this was intentional. I'm not being lazy or saving money to not buy this other thing. I've actually invested more to have this glass thing that's safer for my baby to drink from. So that's a very, I love that you took your skill set of taking imperfect information, and it sounds like triaging a bit, right? Like, what do I do now? And what's the plan forward? Which doctor do we pull in? What person can come in and invest and make this business feasible again? You're doing that with the most precious things that we have in our life, our children.
Yeah, and I thoughtfully selected every physician in my family's life, but a lot of them are not trained to consider environmental exposures. It's just not part of their training. So I also needed to create A to Z of detoxing so I could share it with our beloved physicians. And I know they're not going to read the books, but I have my father, my brother are physicians. But I knew that if they skimmed it, they could see that there are so many highly credible sources that have published research on how toxic exposures are influencing human health and development and reproduction.
Absolutely. In our environment, we don't have a baby to make your life perfect. You have a baby to have a family, and that child's going to grow up and need to raise its own children in a world. And what are we leaving for the next generation is a really valuable thing to consider too. And our purchasing dollars are a vote for things, right? You can choose one thing to spend your money on or another. In the last 15 years of my purchasing groceries, there's a lot more available to me that I would consider higher quality, more ethically raised, a product that has been exposed to less chemicals and pesticides. And that is expanding because our dollars are voting for that. And so the market is responding to that.
Absolutely. And retailers also respond to what parents want. A great example is years ago, parents were putting pressure on major retailers to ban BPA from children's products. It's shocking the number of countries that were already banning it from baby and children's products, but not in the United States. But because of pressure from consumers, major retailers like Babies R Us, among other major retailers, decided to ban BPA from baby and children's products. So that's such a great example of the power that consumers have in the United States.
So, talk to me about a woman who's listening to this. She's going to be thinking, okay, I've heard about organic food. I've heard about not microwaving in plastics, heard about nonstick pans. Like, what other areas of someone's life are big opportunities to be exposed to things that are going to be influential on their health and their fertility?
I ended up identifying what I call household repeat offenders. After lists of chemicals to avoid that took up pages, I felt paralyzed from buying anything on the spot. And I thought, I can't live this way. I need a more strategic approach to buying safer products. And after a while, after a few years, I ended up dissecting a crib mattress. Not physically, though I physically would have if that would have helped, but in trying to understand the safest crib mattress to buy, I ended up having to understand, well, what are the components that create a crib mattress? Because there's one very good report by New York State on crib mattresses and toxic fumes and heavy metals that can expose, that are in our crib mattresses and other mattresses. But I was also looking for more information, and there's actually a lot on the things that make up our crib mattresses. And then I realized, wow, these components also make up many other things in our home, like our carpets, our window treatments, our toys, our furniture, and so much more. So I think it's really helpful and simplifying to really take time to get to know one repeat offender at a time. And plastics might seem obvious as cups and containers and toys, but people don't really realize the many other forms that plastic takes place. For example, microbeads, tiny, tiny little balls of plastic are also in some toothpaste to help make it be more abrasive. They're in facial cleansers and body wash, and they can be glitter. And as you realize, I mean, that can be less intimidating, just deciding for a period of time, I'm going to be really curious about all the ways that plastic shows up in my home. That is very empowering because you'll often think, I don't need that in my life. And as you discover alternatives for what you do need in your life, I have found that there is this back to basics that people experience, which brings so many other benefits. And then another thing is a lot more people are aware that nonstick pots and pans are risky because of a class of chemicals that are used in the formula to make the surface area nonstick. But that idea applies to so many other areas of our life. For example, pizza containers, milk cartons, water in those kind of cartons. If you just step back and think, is it natural that paper containers containing milk or other liquids is not falling apart? Well, it's not falling apart because of chemicals, and those chemicals don't necessarily stay in the packaging. They get released into what you're going to eat and drink. So there's some really common sense ways that you can avoid toxic exposures. But at the end of the day, the most practical, simple way to enjoy a healthier life is as you can eat more homemade meals and store them in glass and stainless steel and take the time to get to know do-it-yourself cleaning recipes, those back to basics will detox your lifetime exposure.
And that repeated exposure is a really interesting thing because that may be a little bit different for you versus me. Like you're in New York, I'm in the outside of in acreage in Kansas, right? You have probably more smog exposure. I have more pesticide exposure in just what I'm interacting with as I walk outside in the air that I'm breathing. And so sometimes I think zooming out and looking at the context of your exposure isn't just how am I brushing my teeth, what food am I eating, but what type of transportation do I use? Where do I spend most of my day? Am I working as a nurse in a hospital that needs to be very sanitized and there's chemicals I'm breathing every room I walk into? There's this, I remember training to be a dietitian. Every patient room I walked in and out of, as I walked in and as I walked out, they required you to use this hand sanitizer. And you could turn that around and see lots and lots of chemicals on that when something as simple as like alcohol could have probably done the job, right? But my repeated exposure may be very different than Sophia's repeated exposure in New York City, which is very different than Sophia, who I do this podcast with, in San Diego. And so zooming out and kind of looking and assessing at your life and maybe journal on it. Like, okay, what did today look like? Not how did I feel when I was driving in the car and was my boss nice to me, or how did this medical treatment go? But what did today feel like? What kind of clothes was I wearing? Was this a natural fabric or something made? Did I, what did I interact with today? When I ran out of time to make breakfast because I slept in, what type of food product did I buy on the way to work and what container was it in? I oftentimes think of people who get Starbucks every day. And it's like, well, at home, I made the switch to this like very nice coffee pot that has no plastics in it. And it's heated only in metal, and there's no plastic touching anything. And I'm not even using these bleached reusable coffee strainers. But I go to Starbucks 4 times a week and I'm drinking out of a paper cup to your point, that is not breaking apart under intense heat. And then I'm sipping through a very thin little plastic layer of something. And so I don't go to Starbucks 4 times a week. My main exposure may be completely different than someone else's. And so thinking about that and kind of assessing that and then looking for big areas is also another kind of critical way to say, I'm just going to tackle this one thing at a time.
Yeah, and if anyone would like a guided experience, I've created a 40-day home detox, which is designed to inform your common sense. And we go through your home and life room by room to identify the easy swaps and eliminations that you don't mind making. But it starts with a list of symptoms that have been associated with things like sick building syndrome and heavy metal toxicity, because there's so many chronic symptoms people experience that they don't realize may be an outcome of course, many factors, but also your chronic toxic exposures. And so infertility or reproductive challenges also is increasingly being associated with these toxic exposures.
Absolutely.
For example, women who have had much higher levels of forever chemicals in their blood have been found to have up to 40% lower chances of achieving a successful pregnancy. And men's sperm is easier to study. And so there are also many studies that found that high pesticide exposure, for example, adversely affects the sperm quality. So there's so many simple things we can do from what we buy, own, and do that can reduce our exposures and lead to meaningful change.
This is so interesting to me. I'm going to pause us for 1 second so we can hear from our sponsors. And then I'd like to come back in and kind of talk a little bit about the other side of things. Like, so how do we support our body in the toxins that we are exposed to? So hang tight, listeners, and we'll be right back.
We're taking a break to talk about our sponsor, Fertility Cloud. In working with hundreds of you ladies, we have noticed a problem that has come up. I know it's come up for me, Caitlin. It's come up for your clients as well. And that is not only finding a doctor who is going to know how to help you, but one that wants to. We have a lot of issues here, and sometimes getting a simple blood test or actually getting a medication or talking to someone who's actually an expert in fertility can not only take an insane amount of time, but it can feel like you're fighting your doctor.
Yeah, or you're playing like Russian roulette to get in front of somebody who actually cares. We are so excited to be partnering with Fertility Cloud because they have a solution for all of these frustrations. Just last week, I had a client that needed right now care, and we couldn't get her in front of an OB. And she got a same-day appointment with Fertility Cloud and spoke to a reproductive endocrinologist and had a prescription that she needed in her hand hours later. This is a solution that our industry desperately needs, and we are so excited to present to you.
So if you're in a remote area and you have to drive 4 hours to go see a doctor, or if you've been to multiple doctors and none of them seem to really listen or really care or want to take an approach that works for you, start up with My Fertility Cloud.
My Fertility Cloud has provided us a link, so check it out in the show notes. That will get you $25 off your first visit with one of their providers.
We're taking a quick break from this episode to talk about one of our sponsors, the Prenatal Nutrition Library.
We love the Prenatal Nutrition Library. It's a searchable database and app, which means you have answers within seconds and peace of mind that what you're eating during pregnancy is both safe and nutritious.
It's almost like having your own personal pregnancy dietitian in your back pocket that's going to not only tell you, is it safe to eat this? How much of that should I have? Yada, yada, yada. But give you actual meal plans so you know how to put it all together onto your plate today. And the meal plans are trimester specific, meaning, some women are kind of nauseous in their first trimester and maybe they need specific foods to help combat that. Prenatal Nutrition Library has got you covered. Or the fact that your baby's brain is growing rapidly in your third trimester and you need your nutrition to support that. Prenatal Nutrition Library meal plans has got you covered there too.
This is evidence-based information. Registered dietitians are in this app weekly answering members' questions. There's an exclusive podcast within the app that's run by Ryan, who is the prenatal dietitian that founded this entire thing. It's a wealth of knowledge and resources and will take you far beyond that one-page handout your doctor handed you that actually probably has out-of-date information about eating in pregnancy.
So head on over to the Prenatal Nutrition Library as soon as you get your big fat positive. Well, okay, first message me and Caitlin so we can do a happy dance with you. Then head over to the Prenatal Nutrition Library to get clear strategies to meet your nutrient needs, as well as to take the stress out of confirming what's safe and most optimal for you and your baby while you're pregnant. Use code FFF20 for 20% off.
Hey guys, we're taking a break from our episode and I want to talk about something that's super confusing. When you head down the supplement aisle and you're looking for a prenatal, and on the prenatal bottle itself, it says, do not take if you're trying to conceive, pregnant, or breastfeeding. Like, what the heck?
Yeah, it says talk to your doctor if you are pregnant, could be pregnant, breastfeeding, postpartum, whatever. And every supplement has this. You go down the supplement aisle, you go shopping on whatever supplement website, and there's a disclaimer on every bottle of every single thing, which means that everything that you've been taking your whole life long is now a big question mark about whether or not you are potentially harming yourself by taking something where you're trying to be healthy. So that is why we partnered with Needed. Needed is a perinatal nutrition supplement brand that has a wide array of products specifically designed for women who are pregnant, trying to become pregnant, breastfeeding, or postpartum. So it's not just that these products can work if you're in that situation, or it's probably okay if you take it while you're trying to conceive. No. These products are researched, they are formulated, and they are put together specifically for women who are trying to conceive, pregnant, breastfeeding, and postpartum.
This answers so many questions. I always get asked, what can I take? It's cold and flu season. What's safe? Needed has an immune support. That's safe whether you're trying to conceive, pregnant. It's even safe for your little ones.
And it's not just immune support. They've got collagen, they've got hydration support, they have digestive support, they have prenatal multi. They even made a line for dudes.
Needed is somebody we're really proud to be partnering with. So head over to their website and use code FFF20 for 20% off your order.
Hey, it's me again, Sophia Pavia, registered dietitian nutritionist specializing in women's health, fertility, and optimal progesterone production. And I'm interrupting an episode of my own podcast to tell you about my online course called Ovulation Unlocked. So if you've been listening to our podcast episodes, you've probably heard a lot of things about basal body temperature, cervical mucus, cervical position, and tracking your fertility. Well, I have designed a 90-minute self-paced online course, which I titled Ovulation Unlocked, that puts all of that together and teaches you how to be the expert on your own fertility from home. This course is designed to put you in the driver's seat of your own fertility, not only so you can know what's going on with your body on any given day, but so that if you need medical help, you can show up to the appointment informed and ready to communicate. Too frequently, us women show up to our doctor's appointments and just say something like, I want to have a baby. And the doctor looks at you and says, good for you. Stop using birth control, start taking a prenatal, come back in a year if you're not pregnant. And that's all we get. However, Ovulation Unlocked puts you in the driver's seat, puts you in control of your fertility to where if you need help, you can show up to that appointment informed and ready to communicate your needs. So if you want to become the expert on your own body and your own fertility, head on over to my Instagram bio and tap the Ovulation Unlocked link today.
All right, we are back. So, Sophia, talk to us a little bit about the idea of your body. I mean, you could do everything perfectly, right? And we're still going to have some exposure to toxic chemicals, to toxic even byproducts in our own body of normal metabolism. So, what can somebody do from all this research that you have done over the years? How can somebody arm their body or support their body in a way to handle the toxins that they are exposed to?
I would like people to think about toxic exposures as important as diet, exercise, good sleep, healthy doses of sunshine. It's just an important, often overlooked pillar of health. And the more you can pick one thing to do, just like with diet or sleep or exercise, you may have small goals that you're working on. And if you could just, when it feels manageable, add one small change you can make to reduce your chronic exposures, then that will be so meaningful. So for example, if, of course, we have to eat outside the home, we can't always eat homemade meals and snacks. But if you could just increase like the number of homemade meals by like one a week and maybe make a batch so you can freeze some of it, then that can be the beginning of transforming your life. So I think it's important to manage stress. So while I think it's very important that people learn more about toxic exposures they can avoid, you don't want to overwhelm yourself, and you want to put it in perspective. And so again, picking one small thing, again, like focusing on eating well, sleeping well, exercise. And I don't talk so much about what you can do to eliminate toxins from your body. I focus on how to keep them from entering your body. And like you said, Caitlin, we can never live a completely non-toxic life, but the goal is to reduce your exposure so your body is less burdened to do what it's brilliantly designed to do.
I think about how, the topic of stress. There is a certain amount of stress that's very healthy. Like the stress of your alarm clock to get up in the morning can be a very normal day-to-day stress. But having a job that's really hard and you have a boss that's out for you, or you're just not technically qualified for it, you didn't have somebody that's really teaching you, like that alarm clock can feel very different if what you're waking up to has this overwhelming burden itself. And so what you just said there, I think, is a really powerful thing. You can look at infertility, and our listeners fight this reality where you can think that this is just some complex puzzle before you. And if you don't do it exactly right and in the right order, or you bought the wrong prenatal, or you didn't eat, you ate dessert that one night when you shouldn't have, like, oh boy, I'm not going to get pregnant this month. It's a slippery slope for individuals that have been walking a walk of trying to get pregnant for a really long time. And so it can very quickly become like that alarm clock, and you're going to that job that's really overwhelming and you're not technically qualified for. Or you can wake up and say, okay, I'm going to take this moment by moment. And the first thing I'm going to do, I'm really used to going and taking that K-cup, that thin, flimsy plastic K-cup, and throwing it in the coffee machine, and then pushing really burning hot water through it. And think about the exposure you're getting there. I can look at that and go, this is the thing I'm going to work on right now. I'm going to continue to drink coffee because I love coffee, but I'm going to find a better way to drink it so that I'm not exposed to these chemicals in just the way that I'm trying to prepare it before we even get to the coffee bean itself. And then, like Sophia's saying, then maybe the next week you look at what coffee bean am I purchasing and how has that been treated. So I think being able to kind of look at that and go, okay, let's even contextualize the change we're looking at and say, let's not make it burdensome. Let's take it step by step and grow and improve in a sustainable way. Because I think a lot of people very quickly think I have to throw out all my skincare, need to buy all brand new makeup, I need to buy new pots and pans, all my cleaners need to be like swapped out, and it feels like so much all at once. And so practically picking things that you're really have a high level of exposure to, or we know are maybe on the higher end of toxicity, right? Picking an area, working to change that, and then looking for the next opportunity. Simple things like I love that you're not coming on here because people hear detox and they think of like what I watched my mom do. Like green juice is this, liver cleanse that, these things that are very kind of diet culture heavy. That if you're not putting a pinch of cayenne pepper with lemon in your water and a little bit of honey and drinking that for a week straight, you're not setting your body up to detox. Well, your body was expertly made, and you have a liver, you have skin, you have lungs. I mean, we have many levels of detoxifying elements within our own body that are set up to do just that. And so lowering their burden of needing to process as many things. And one area that I think people don't really think about is actually medicine. Like you think, oh, well, this Advil is helping my headache go away. But maybe the headache's there because of dehydration, and water could help your headache go away too, but your body's not going to have to deal with the leftover medicine and get it out of your body when it's done. And so kind of looking back in a view, and I'm interested to hear kind of the structure of your book, how, because you say it's A to Z, how is that how do you walk people through reorganizing their life in this way that we can lower these exposures? Like, what does the plan look like?
It sounds intimidating, but it actually, I'll just show you, it's right here. I wanted it to be a coffee table book, which sounds so funny, but I wanted it to be the kind of book where you could leave it on a surface area and there's no urge to just put it away. So that people would pick it up, open it to any page, and learn something new, whether they were reading one sentence or one paragraph. But it's basically 4 parts, and the first is an overview of our toxic exposures and the health risks, what it means to our biology. Second are the household repeat offenders I talked about. And part 3 is how those household repeat offenders show up in our lives. So they show up as cleaning products, self-care products, interior furnishings in our kitchen, and children's stuff. And then the rest of the book is all tips, and it's shown very graphically, so it's a little playful. I try to be playful with it, easy to skim because I don't like to read a lot. And I also have just the top 10 things to focus on. If you feel overwhelmed, you don't know where to start, you could just focus on these top 10 things, top 10 ideas with little baby steps for each. And what I love about the top 10 is that they don't affect your budget. I want to debunk this myth that living a healthier life or less toxic one is expensive. It doesn't have to be. There are plenty of things that you can do that won't affect your budget, and they might even save you money.
Do you want to share 1 or 2 very practical things somebody could do maybe
Sure.
in these categories, like maybe one that's a cleaning solution, maybe one that's a kitchen solution?
Sure. One area is thinking about your indoor air quality. A lot of people don't realize that indoor air tends to be at least 2 to 5 times more polluted than outdoor air, even in the most industrialized cities. So once I realized that, I thought, why is indoor air so polluted? It's because of all the things we have in our homes,
Hmm.
including building materials, but I don't go there because I don't want to be telling anyone or suggesting anyone should redo their home. But an easy solution is to air out your home when outdoor air quality is better than indoor air quality. So if you're in the country, you want to be mindful of if neighbors are spraying pesticides or if it's mosquito season and other things. You want to be mindful of it, but there are
Hmm.
plenty of times when it would improve your indoor air quality to crack open your windows and let your home breathe. Second is ventilating when you're cooking. It sounds so simple, but so many people do not turn on their ventilation when they turn on the stove and they start cooking. A general idea that's good to be aware of is that whenever there's combustion activity, whenever there's the burning of something, then the chances are high that there are toxic fumes or byproducts being created. So combustion activity is not just cooking on a stove, but burning wood in the fireplace or burning candles. So just be aware, because if you're going to use the fireplace or burn candles, then you also want to crack open your windows, assuming outdoor air quality won't increase any health risks. Moving on to dust. Household dust has been found to have dozens of toxic chemicals and heavy metals. So prioritizing vacuuming is a really high impact way to improve your indoor air quality and reduce your exposures. And related to the dust is washing your hands after, definitely before you eat, but also after touching things where lots of hands touch, and electronics that will have toxic like chemical flame retardants, which are needed to keep electronics from catching on fire. But so remote controls and computer keyboards, just be more mindful that scientists who study the chemical flame retardants say the best thing we can do is wash our hands after we touch them.
That's
And
great
since
to
we're
know.
talking about hands, I'll just add that maybe you moisturize a lot. You moisturize your hands after washing them. Make sure that the moisturizer you use is non-toxic. I just use olive oil or coconut oil. It's easy, it's safe enough to eat. And as a mom who's often touching food for my children's snacks and meals, I just like that I'm using oils that are safe enough to eat.
It's such a good point because I think we often think like, oh, my body's going to absorb it. But what about what you're going to go touch and how that might impact somebody that's then putting that in their mouth or on their body?
Absorbing the ingredients of the moisturizer too. And a lot of moisturizers, along with other household products, are made of petroleum-based ingredients. You don't want that being absorbed.
Absolutely. Exactly. That's my main point is we think about maybe that side, but I hadn't really thought about the fact that I'm going from washing my hand to making a snack for my kid. Or like we just got back from going to our botanical gardens. All morning long, I was in and out of our snack containers getting things for them, and I think that kind of reeling in the idea of, once you have a kid, I think it feels like it becomes so obvious. Like, what type of container is your child's food going to school with them in? That's so visual. But to understand the impact that you're going to have on your baby in utero, that the exposures that you are exposed to, you are now presenting to your baby, is really quite humbling because, yes, you have a placenta. Yes, it's going to filter out what it can filter out, but they're finding in cord blood high levels of things like BPA, heavy metals, things that mom is exposed to, baby is exposed to. And we don't have enough research on what those far away effects are. I think oftentimes we look at just, does it have 10 fingers and 10 toes, like the very obvious implications. But what about asthma? What about this neurological divergence? What about, there's a lot of those what abouts that these things are probably impacting. And I'm sure that there may be some genetic kind of weaknesses in some of us more than others, where you can't necessarily just say like only your exposure to this is going to equal that. There's more in terms of your body's genetics interacting with the environment. But why gamble on that? Like I found in my pregnancies that no one's more careful than a pregnant woman. Or, and maybe the other asterisk there is somebody that's trying to be pregnant, that's struggling. I've never met a more fierce or motivated person than a mother in those stages. And so use that superpower, like get fierce about it and get serious about making these changes because they are impactful. I think one voice kind of in the fertility space that is really loud in this area is a reproductive endocrinologist out of Seattle that I follow pretty closely. And I'll link her in the show notes of this, where she's talking about, and she lives in a crunchy city. But if doctors are starting to talk about this that are trained in medicine, that are certainly haven't spent the time that maybe Sophia has spent in the weeds of research, are starting to talk about this, we really better start listening because we know they're 14 years behind what's actually going on. It's how long it takes to show up in medical research. So,
And the research is growing, and I'm grateful to be on this podcast and have listeners think that what I wish I knew sooner. I was thinking so much about how do I get pregnant? That was like the end goal. And so much of these exposures are being linked to not just pregnancy outcomes, but adult onset diseases. There's a whole field called fetal origins of adult onset diseases. So to your point, Caitlin, that science is growing stronger all the time. And so the more we can embrace this area and do what we can, the more we're giving our offspring and their offspring.
Absolutely. And I think when you consider, oftentimes people talk about when you're pregnant with a girl, your grandchildren's follicles, that half of the DNA is inside of you while you're pregnant. And I urge people to not let a thought like that feel so heavy, like you're going to mess it up, but be humbled by it and think about the extreme privilege you have if you are carrying a baby that's a girl, that your grandbabies, half of them are in there already, right? TBD who's bringing the other half of the genetics. But that's a pretty incredible and humbling thought. And let that power some of your reticence or, whatever mental struggles are in your way. Sophia's telling us right now it doesn't have to be a financial struggle. So maybe go grab that A to Z of detoxing so that you can see really practical steps in how to address these things. But approach it as it's just important as making sure you go to sleep at a regular time, making sure you're getting good amounts of hydration and clean water. I think sometimes we focus on the big pieces that we think, oh, the little pieces don't matter. And things just as simple as that gas station receipt can add up time after time. And so looking at those things can be really powerful. Where can people find your book and other resources that you might have?
The book is available wherever books are sold, but definitely Amazon is highly convenient for a lot of people. And I offer so many other things like 40-Day Home Detox and the Practical Non-Toxic Living podcast. You can find it all on ruanliving.com, RUAN living.com.
Awesome. And we very quickly need to pull together a yeah girl. So is there anything that you want to celebrate today with our listeners?
What is top of mind are these collagen marshmallows that I've been making recently. I'm very proud of myself for making them because they were very intimidating to make, but they're full of very mindfully selected ingredients like grass-fed collagen and gelatin and maple syrup. And I have them in my coffee and tea, and it's brought great
Yum.
delight to my day.
I need that recipe. I would love to try that. Is that one of your
I
recipes or did
actually
you try
create
someone out?
I created a blog, and so I'm happy to share the link. And
Yes.
it actually looks a little artisanal because the second time I made it, I added rose powder and butterfly pea powder. Those are both beautiful
Blue.
flowers that have unique nutrients, but
Uh-huh.
they're very pretty too.
Is that butterfly pea one the blue one?
Yes.
So this is not my yeah girl. I'm gonna tell it quick because I know Sophia is somewhere she's gonna be after this. It was my husband's birthday this weekend, and we made like a 5-course dinner for him. It was really fun. And my signature cocktail, I made butterfly pea flower ice cubes because when you put them in a drink and you add citrus, they turn purple. So the citrus kind of interacts with the color. I think you need a little alcohol because I did a mocktail version for my kids and like theirs didn't turn the intense purple that the
I
adult
love
version had.
that.
But it was really fun and could be like a fun, kid
So
experience, science
fun.
experience. Yeah.
I am making that too. I love that.
Yes. So okay, my yeah girl. So yeah, girl, I love that. And I want the recipe because we are all about grass fed. We are all about getting your fat and your gelatin and your collagen on this podcast. It is very much up our suggestion alley. My yeah girl today is I am leaving the day after tomorrow to go to a food photography retreat where I'm going to learn all about doing my own food photography because to date I've hired other food photographers to do it for me. And it's something that I've always really wanted to learn how to do. I just know I'm not good at it. Like I make it taste good. How do I style it and photograph it and edit it? I don't know. So
Awesome.
send me your marshmallow recipe and maybe that'll be one that I practice on when I get home next week.
Yeah, it's really fun, and I can't wait to see the photographs of your marshmallows.
Yeah, yeah. Well, guests, audience, we are privileged to speak a little bit of life into you today, give you some tips. Thank you, Sophia, for your time, for putting up with our technical issues as we started. You're very gracious, and we will have to have you back sometime so you can get the full experience with our other Sophia. And maybe we'll pick maybe a more narrow focus because you've got my mind rolling on air quality in my house right now, in my 1970s house. I'm thinking about things as we're talking. So I need to go buy your book when I hang up. And we will see you next time. Make sure that if you have not already, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Food Freedom and Fertility on YouTube. Leave us a rating. Have a great day.
Hey, it's Sophia. If you love the show and want to continue your health and fertility journey using our resources, head on over to foodfreedomfertility.com for show notes, links to products and services, information about our guests, and our newsletter. Again, that's foodfreedomfertility.com. Thanks for listening.